Well, good morning and welcome to the next session of this summit. I'm Matt Dancona. I'm an editor and partner at Tortoise, and I'm delighted to be hosting this next session, which we're doing in partnership with Capita, and thanks very much to them for that, because I think it addresses a really central question in this whole debate we're having today with the new index results, but also with the events of the last nearly 2 years. And the question is, has COVID-19 appreciably changed business responsibility and the way that we perceive it, the expectations we have of it, and the praxis that's actually now evolving as at least in the developed world, the case numbers recede in number and the fatalities fall dramatically. We've got two fantastic speakers, Katja Hall, the Chief Corporate Affairs and Marketing Officer at Capita, and Tracey, the Chief Strategy and Sustainability Officer at Nationwide Building Society, both of whom have a lot to say, and I want to get them to say it and get out of their way as quickly as possible. So I'm going to dive straight in and ask Katja to give us a kind of sit rep. I mean, here we are in the middle of October 2021. I think if we asked this question back in March 2020, none of us would have expected that at this point in the next calendar year, we'd still be really kind of trying to find our way about how the practice of work had been changed, what has been revealed by the experience of the pandemic, but we are. So Katja, I wonder if you can give us a kind of, a sort of tour d'horizon, a landscape picture of where you see us right now.
Yes, thank you very much, Matt, and hi and good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. So yeah, I think that's right. I think we are still we're still working out what this new world of work means for all of us, and I think the pandemic accelerated a lot of trends in the responsible business in the ESG field, both around equality and diversity. I think the whole kind of inequality debate has been accelerated. Also, of course, all the conversations around climate change, work-life balance, mental health. I think people feel able to be a lot more honest and open about their personal circumstances than before, which is obviously a very good and positive thing. And then I think this whole debate around the workplace and how we make hybrid working a reality, which is becoming, of course, politically heated as well. And I think that a lot of employees are still working out what they actually want. So I know you've done some survey work. We've surveyed our own employees. 77% of them want to work flexibly and work from home 3 days or more. But I wonder if that's going to change actually over the coming months as people get more used to coming back into offices, and also people discovering what kind of works best at home and what works best in the office. And I suspect we'll end up in a situation where if people want to do more focused work, they'll be at home, but they'll come into the workplace for collaboration and for innovation. And I think employers will need to kind of respond to this evolving picture. But we're not there yet, I think. And actually it's I think doing hybrid working well is proving harder than perhaps some of us anticipated.
Yes, it's definitely so, and it's interesting you alluded to the political dimension, because we had last week the Conservative Party conference, and Boris Johnson sort of urging people to go back to the office lest they suffer from the gossip around the water cooler through their absence, which is, I think, perhaps jumping the gun a bit. But I'm interested in what you say about the pandemic and the kind of pressures of it, having had the benign consequence of opening up channels between workforce and management. And I wondered if you could say a bit more about that, how it's made people communicate, and whether, are these messages you're getting very individuated, or can you detect patterns in them?
Yes, so I think probably the biggest change in the workplace has been the relationship between employer and employee. And I think in the early days of the pandemic, we all got to know each other's pets and each other's children, and we kind of realized that actually we're all human. And although we were dialing in from very different places, that kind of less formal, less hierarchical relationship between leaders, I guess, and the broader workforce has changed pretty fundamentally. And I think, and I hope that will continue. And I think the kind of old days in my world of communications, the old days of the CEO doing a town hall and just projecting his or her views to the employees with very little kind of two-way conversation or little feedback. I think those days are gone. I think we are seeing a much more, leaders are having to listen much more to their employees. We've done lots of listening sessions. I'm sure other companies nationwide will have done that too. So lots of focus groups, lots of listening to employees, and leaders talking much less and listening much more than before. And I think that's going to continue. And I think that also means employees now feel able to talk more about what they need from the workplace in order to be productive, in order to look after their own well-being. And employers are having to respond to that, and we'll need to think about that much more. I think particularly the whole well-being agenda, and that links to kind of more serious mental health issues, but also this sense of people wanting to feel that they can have some control over their lives, and they know how to be effective and how to perform at the best, and they want that flexibility. So we're definitely seeing that at Capita, and we're having a lot of conversations around how we make that work. I guess the other thing to point out is that it isn't an option for everybody. So there are people whose work hasn't changed that much, and who aren't able to have that much control, and we should be kind of conscious and mindful of that as well. So for lots of people, things haven't changed and the workplace hasn't changed.
Well, thanks very much for that, Katja. I want to come back to you on pick up on a lot of that. But I'd like to turn to Claire now. Welcome, Claire. And thank you very much for making the time for this event today. I wondered if I could ask you, sort of as a kickoff, about the whole question of the work-life balance issue and what it has, what the pandemic period, I mean, it's not over, but the worst of it has revealed about people's expectations of work-life balance, and in a way, whether those expectations are deliverable by businesses.
Sure. So yeah, thank you for having me. So at Nationwide, we actually had about 13,000 people working from home during the pandemic. So obviously, you know, a huge factor for us, as Katja said for herself. We've actually been quite, I'd say, progressive about this. So in March this year, our CEO came out and we announced that we now have a sort of work anywhere promise. So all our office-based colleagues basically can work from anywhere in the UK going forward. And we're really talking about people just thinking about, you know, what's the work? What does the work require you to do? And where does the work require you to be? And our offices are really being seen much more as, to Katja's point, collaboration spaces, bringing people together. I think one impact that the pandemic's had is it's certainly really raised, as Katja says, the focus on those frontline colleagues who still had to be in branches, who still had to be in call centres for us. And that's really focused a lot of senior management time and attention on really understanding and listening to our frontline and what they needed to be successful and to feel safe during the pandemic. In terms of your question on work-life balance, Matthew, I mean, you know, we have seen a general rise in fatigue by people feeling sort of, you know, they're constantly on meetings, hour after hour, really on Teams. We've tried to introduce quite a lot of things in this space to help with that. So we've introduced Teams-free times, so chunks of time in the day where we're really encouraging people to like not get off camera and have a bit of space. We've got a buddy system to try and buddy people up to try and fight against kind of people feeling isolated, particularly where they can't go into the office. And we've rolled out the kind of mental health app Unmind to all our people. We're also starting to have kind of quite significantly structured sort of organizational conversations across the piece to sort of talk to each other about what's needed. So at the moment, we think that the work-life implications are manageable at an organizational level. But I think you're right. I think we do see there are kind of hotspots of areas where people are getting fatigued. And, you know, clearly we've done some responses to that, and we're going to have to keep an eye on that and make sure that it doesn't become an issue.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, up until COVID, really, although there was a certain amount of working from home and flexible working practices, we were still essentially in the grip of, I guess you'd call it almost the Fordist 20th century model of the office, where everyone who worked in an office came to the office and worked a 9 to 5, whatever their working hours were, and then went home. And although that didn't apply to everyone by any means, it was the default position. Now, there are two narratives that have come out of COVID. One is that COVID was really just a pause, and that slowly but surely we will revert to that old model. I'm sensing from what you say, Claire, that you think that's not the case, and actually the hybrid model is here to stay. Would that be fair?
Yes, I mean that's our view. Is that, you know, this is presented an opportunity. It's presented an opportunity for us to look at things in new ways, look at working in new ways, and come back better from it. You know, it's also strategically, you know, very interesting for us. So Nationwide, you know, we're the UK's second biggest mortgage lender, and we're doing a huge amount of work on green homes. So the other thing that's really interesting is that hybrid working also creates an opportunity for us to start to get more into a space that is super important, with UK residential homes being 20% of the UK's carbon emissions, to actually say to our people, well, yes, you can work at home if you want to work at home, but also let's just start to think about the carbon emissions from your home and how we can actually tie, you know, our big strategic priority of helping green the UK homes to the fact that we have thousands of people now working in their homes over the winter, in service of the society. So that's been a sort of very interesting debate for us.
So somebody said to me the other day that you can't coach a football team on Zoom, and I think the point being made was there is a great deal you can do, and the possibilities of electronic communication have been sort of remarkably and extraordinarily and very swiftly shown by what we've had to go through in the last couple of years. But I wonder, to that point, are there aspects of work and leadership that you can't do remotely? Because we all know that creativity and moments of, you know, private conversation and asides and just kicking ideas around, these are things that tend to happen in person rather than on a screen, aren't they?
Yes, but you don't need them to be happening all the time. So I think what Katja said is really true about, you know, seeing people's pets, seeing people's houses. But I think in some ways Zoom can create that false sense of kind of personal connectivity, because you do see the pets and the children and the houses. But on the other hand, you know, you can also become very transactional in your dealings with each other. And so I think, you know, we absolutely believe there is absolutely a place for people to connect, to spend time together interpersonally. It just doesn't have to be 5 days a week anymore.
No, I'm sure that's right. Can I go back to Katja? Katja, you mentioned the whole huge issue of well-being, and obviously one of the things that happened during the pandemic was that people were you know, in varying degrees, depending on their circumstances at home, under ferocious pressure, which, you know, raised questions of pastoral responsibility amongst employers to an extent I think as never before. And obviously that's a good thing. I guess my question to you is, you know, we're not, as employers, we're not trained psychiatrists, we're not psychotherapists. You know, there is a limit to what we can actually do. So where does that take us? How do we actually make the help that's necessary available, and what are the resource implications, and what are the logistic implications of that change?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. And we certainly found when we started kind of ramping up our wellbeing support, we found that a lot of managers were worried about asking their employees about their well-being, because they were worried about, not because they didn't want to know, they did want to know, but they were worried about saying the wrong thing, and they were worried about somehow making an issue worse. So we've done a few things. So firstly, I think encouraging people to be open about how they're feeling, and this kind of, it's okay not to be okay. We do a lot of campaigns around that, for encouraging people to talk up. And I think there the role of leaders is critical. So people need to see senior leaders talking about their mental health issues or concerns or problems they may have had in the past. And then secondly, we've trained managers just in terms of how to have the conversation and asking open questions, and the importance of listening. Actually, you don't need to have the answers, you don't need to solve the problem, you just need to be open and show compassion and empathy to an employee who's struggling. And then thirdly, the professional support. And we've got mental health support, and we've got a 24-hour helpline that our employees can use, and that has been used more significantly during COVID than before. I'm sure other companies, a lot of other companies will have something similar, but I think that's the kind of the role of the manager is to listen, to be supportive, to think about how the kind of role, I guess, can be adaptive to support an employee who is having problems. But then I think after that, of course, it needs to be together with a professional, and that professional often might be actually a kind of professional provided by the workplace, or it might be somebody that an employee is seeing through the NHS. So that will vary, but I think it's about understanding the roles, but really importantly, not for managers to shy away from having the conversation and from asking somebody how they're doing, and to say that they're worried about them if they are.
It's such an interesting point. I wonder if we could bring in Bill Ayres, who's making a very interesting point in the chat, as are one or two others, about this aspect of managerial responsibility and I guess boundaries in the new in the new dispensation. Bill, I don't know if you're there or available. Perhaps not. Ah, great. He's coming now. Normal service will be resumed shortly. Yes, because it's fascinating, and I'm reading a number of comments in the chat about the whole, Andrew Goodwood makes a very interesting point about privacy and the limits of that. So Bill, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, sorry.
Oh, hi. There you go. So Bill, I don't want to paraphrase the excellent point you made, but I think it would be worth elaborating, if you're minded to, about the issues raised by that responsibility. That mental health awareness is not the same as mental health practice.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference, and I think there's been a big trend to talk about mental health awareness, but it isn't the same as understanding. And I think the reality is companies are avoiding the central issue, which is actually how do managers and leaders actually lead and manage people, and to what degree does that create stress, pressure, and mental health issues. And so the problem is awareness is actually, I think, not getting under the root of the issue. I think it almost implies that saying you're okay, you should open up, slightly abdicates responsibility on how is the company actually managing people, how is it supporting people. So I think that's the first point, Matthew. How much of this is stress is actually endemic in a company's culture and the way they're pushing people. But I think the second thing to your point is about actual understanding. So I mean, there's an amazing amount of tools now to help people's well-being, CBT, compassion-based therapy, loads of different things that can be used. And most companies use very lightweight 24-hour counseling services that, frankly, the people are not that well trained, and they don't really necessarily provide the full tools. Often they're capped at 5 sessions. So I'm afraid to say I think companies are pretty unsophisticated on mental health at the moment, and should be shifting to understanding, making sure every manager understands mental health much better. So I would be a bit more, sorry, Katja, I hear what you're saying, but I'd be a lot more challenging the standard and level of performance by companies on it needs to be significantly raised. And I think you're right, COVID has raised the issue, but there's a long way to go.
Did you want to come back on that, Katja? Because it's a very interesting point Bill raises.
Yes, it is, and I completely agree with you in terms of the causes of stress or of mental ill health, and the role of leaders and managers in that, and understanding workplace stress, I guess, and I think pressure at work has been intense for quite a lot of people during COVID. So this is about understanding what has caused the issue, of course, as well. And do we have the right managers and leaders who lead in the right way so that the issue doesn't arise in the first place? I completely agree that that's critical. And then on the support, I'm sure companies could do a lot more. And I'm sure Capita could do a lot more, but we're doing a lot more than we have ever done. And it is, it's an issue that we discuss at EXCO. It's an issue that is discussed at the board. It is a kind of board level issue in a way that, I think probably in a lot of workplaces it wouldn't have been 5 or 10 years ago. And interestingly, investors increasingly ask about employee engagement in the broadest sense. And they understand the importance of employee retention and engagement to business performance. So it is very much seen as a critical issue. That's not to say we haven't got a long way to go. And obviously we know that COVID has led to an increase in mental health issues for adults, but also, of course, for children. And the other thing we're seeing is a lot of parents having to take time off to look after children who are suffering with mental health issues. So I think that kind of broader picture is important too, and employees need to think about how they support the kind of whole family when a child is suffering, for example.
Claire, thank you so much, Katja. Claire, can I come to you on this broad theme? Because I think the whole question of mental health under this rubric is intrinsically interesting, but it also raises a very important question about the duty of care that companies have towards their employees, and the problems of exercising that duty of care in the new model that we've been talking about. Because the truth is that if you're seeing people every day in the flesh, you're probably able to detect more quickly if there are difficulties. It's not a guarantee, but I would have thought the probability is higher. If you're dealing with large workforces, incredibly dispersed, taking any form of leadership role as regards their mental health, not as practitioners, but as perhaps gatekeepers to mental health services, is very hard, isn't it? I mean, that is a big change in management culture.
It is very hard. And I think what it does is it does shine somewhat of a spotlight on like the underlying organizational culture. So, you can make point interventions around putting in place kind of new policies or new services, but I think the underlying culture of the organization just becomes more important in a way that it hasn't been before. I mean, obviously with Nationwide Building Society, we're a mutual society. We don't have we're owned by our 16 million members. We have, I guess, what is generally quite a supportive organizational culture. We've had a lot of focus for a number of years now on, accountable freedom, on allowing our people to be empowered. And I think having a sort of a baseline sympathetic organizational culture is a huge part of this. And obviously for someone like Nationwide, also having a strong social purpose, which we have, can really help. I think, any interventions that you put in to support your employees, to support your mental health, to their mental health, and generally create support, if it's sort of grafted onto an organizational culture that is not aligned to that, and that has a different underlying message about what matters within the organization, I think that becomes really, really challenging and really troubling. So I think, this actually shines much more of a light on the underpinning organizational culture. And I want to say, Matthew, one other thing, I think is a really important point that was made in the chat about the gender balance of how the impact has come, and particularly to Katja's point about, if you've got children off, thinking about the kind of differential way that the weight of domestic responsibilities is weighing on employees is another really important factor.
It's interesting you talk about culture, because one of the things about culture by definition is it's very difficult to create by directive, isn't it? I mean, a culture in an organization is something that emerges over a period of time. So in this sort of, I suppose, interim period between, full-blown pandemic and return to what we hope will be something like the new normal, is Nationwide taking a series of steps to put in place the foundations for that new culture, or is it less conscious than that?
I think actually we see that the existing culture that we've got is a really solid foundation because of the nature of the organization that we are, because we're a sort of almost by definition a responsible business. Actually, in many ways, that's quite beneficial. I think, we are definitely doing a lot more, as I was saying, around having conversations between different people in the organization. There is a lot of listening going on. Everything that we can do to continue to build on sort of trust and our employee engagement, which is already, very high, we're really, really doing. But for us, fortunately, in some ways, it's a continuation of a journey, as opposed to, there'll definitely be organizations that will struggle more because they will have had a bit more of a sort of red in tooth and claw, competitive kind of culture, and how you then graft on a sort of a caringness around, mental health and well-being in a remote working world onto a culture that is fundamentally like that, I think is a really, interesting and quite challenging thing to do, I would imagine.
Absolutely. I don't know if Linda House-Manus is available. Linda, are you there? Because
I am, Matthew. Hello.
How are you? You were making some very interesting points about gender in this context, which I wondered if you might like to share.
Yeah, thank you. Morning, everyone. I suppose it helps if I sort of say who I am, actually. Linda House-Manus. I'm the CEO of the Institute of Workplace and Facilities Management. So obviously over the last 18 months, we've been working very hard with our members who have been sort of at the front line here. And we as an institute did a lot of public surveys at the beginning, in the middle, and towards the end of the pandemic, even though we're sort of still in it, to find out what the response has been to this experiment all of a sudden to home working. Because over the years, most companies have had the opportunity for invariably senior people to work from home, not the rest of the staff. And obviously, technology has allowed the big experiment to happen. A lot of people work from home, but as we found over the course of the pandemic, more and more and more towards the end, all of a sudden it was, I hate to say it, but men who were saying, I can't wait to get back to the office. Women were saying, I'd like the flexibility, please, to remain working from home at least some of the time, and to have that, and not having this prescribed, you must go in on a Tuesday and a Thursday, etc., to have that ability to choose when they want to go in, because it's still the case where women invariably are running the home, children, etc. Our concerns is that once again, having, I suppose, a woman of a certain age gone through the whole, equality and women's rights and fighting for a place within organisations, whether or not, if you carry on that trajectory over 5-10 years, will we then go back to an environment where it will be, unfortunately, the men who will get the promotions because they're the ones in the office or in the working environment, where the women will now start to get sidelined because they have chosen to work from home. And I think, it's been amazing that people have been able to work, amazing that organisations have continued to be in business, etc. And let's face it, a lot of workplaces are not really conducive to people doing their best work. I'm just concerned about culturally and having this now split class of people who are now seen and people who are now not seen, and whether they would now start to be diminished in a working environment going forward.
Because it's such an interesting point, this, Linda, that you raised, which is, women have the wit and foresight to see the potentialities of flexible working, and therefore more than men have embraced those potentialities. But the paradox is that there is a risk that as they do so, we'll go back to where we were in the past, where the office is a sort of testosterone charged men's club. I mean, I massively caricature, and female workers are outside the office. And so I guess my question is, how do you avoid that?
That's a big $6 million question, isn't it? It's a case of, because I come back down to it time and time again. It's about the culture of the organisation, and going forward, if you're going to have equity and diversity and inclusion, and not have it as a piece of paper, it's like social responsibility statements. And obviously, I was on the call earlier about modern day slavery and about sustainability goals, etc. It is not enough now for companies to have these policy statements, laminate them, stick them on the wall, and actually do nothing about it. We as business owners who are running businesses have now a duty, not just to build a sustainable business going forward, but to try and build and rebuild a just and fair society. And that means for all people and all classes and all genders, etc. And therefore, and if you are going to have the ability to have a working from home, that flexibility, which is the right thing to do, you have got to ensure that those people are still included. And I think leaders are going to have to work, I'm afraid to say, a bit harder.
No, I'm sure that's true. Thanks so much, Linda. Can we come to Andrew Girdwood, who, as well as being a stalwart of Tortoise events and much valued member, I think it's fair to say, Andrew, you've got views on this, haven't you?
I do, but they're not crystallized. I really wrestle with it. I absolutely agree that it's a cultural thing, but I also firmly believe there is such a thing as a work-life balance. And I think not just in this call, but I'm routinely hearing now that a good leader shares their personal life. I think on this call, I think it was Katja, we talked about a good leader would talk about their own mental health issues, apart, being approachable, being transparent, being authentic, being human. But this is also, surely we're crossing into privacy issues. We are merging work and life together. And I have concerns about that. I guess I have concerns about that because I think hybrid is a milksop term. We should be remote first. Everything that is possible should be done so it can be done remotely. I'm not saying don't go into the office, and I'm not disagreeing that sometimes the office is better. But I do think rather than saying we have a hybrid mentality, we have a remote first mentality. I think it takes businesses to a better place. So I'm clearly on board. But I just can't get my head around this work-life balance.
You can't get your head around it because you think it's unachievable, Andrew, or just because it's defining it is so hard.
I don't want to say because I can't see a way through, it doesn't mean it's unachievable. But right now, I can't see a way through. I cannot see a way where to do all the best practice, share my experiences, let people into my inner thought, into thinkings, talk about my mental health issues, which is what everybody says I should do. To me, it was like, no, your work, go away. I want to draw a line here. And I don't know how to do that well, and I look after my own mental health well.
Again, it comes back to such a fascinating dilemma, and I don't think there's a single one-size-fits-all answer, which is how to keep the door open, but also how to maintain the boundaries, which, as you say, Andrew, are entirely necessary and appropriate to any decent and civil workplace. I wonder if I can come now to John Hawksley, who was talking in the chat about his surveys of people in call centers. John, are you about? Looking for John. Okay, let me go back then to Katja. Katja, I suppose in all of this, I'm intrigued by the whole question of, we talk a lot about the responsibility of businesses, but all employment relationships are contractual and transactional to a large extent. So what have we learned about the responsibilities of employees in this?
Yes, good question. And if I may, can I just
please do? Yeah.
Quickly comment on, because it's such an interesting conversation, and I wanted to make two brief points on. Firstly, on the impact of the pandemic on women and on gender equality. So I agree with a lot of the points that have been made, but I also feel that I think one of the good things actually with people working more from home is that dads have been able to see their kids more. And I'm Swedish, as you can probably tell, but I do feel if we're just looking at this from a female or a mother's perspective, then we're missing a trick. This is about parents being able to spend more time with their kids and parents having more flexibility. And I think we shouldn't miss the opportunity to look at it through that lens. And we've got, in my team, for example, we don't have meetings between 3 and 4 because I've got lots of people with school-age kids, so that's when they go and pick their kids up. It makes no difference to me whatsoever. But it's about men and women, I think. And of course, actually, men doing more caring helps women. So and then on the point of privacy, I think, really interesting and important and difficult. I don't think it's about forcing anybody to talk about something they're not comfortable talking about. That isn't a good way around it. But I guess, and if you look at physical health, there would probably be some physical health issues you'd be quite comfortable talking to your colleagues about, and there might be some you're not. And I guess it's just about if the culture is inclusive and open and there is a high degree of trust, then perhaps more people will feel able to talk about mental health issues, and that would be a good thing, I think. And then on your point about the responsibility of employees, I think this comes back to being kind of having more adult-to-adult relationship in the workplace. So if the employer treats the employee as an adult, judges them on outcomes, not on whether they're in an office, and trusts that they'll get the work done in a way that suits them, then similarly, I think the employee needs to respect and respond to requests to, for example, come into an office to collaborate or for a particular meeting, or to be available at key times when the employer needs them to. So I think ultimately it's about both sides behaving like adults and understanding that actually for it to work, it's got to be a kind of win-win. So it's not about give and take, and it's not about I win and you lose.
Absolutely. Claire, can I come back to you on that and anything else you wanted to address from what we've been discussing? But perhaps start with the question of employee responsibility, and then anything else you wanted to come back on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole point about honesty and transparency about really where are you, where is the work, how are things going, and having a culture that facilitates those discussions is really, really important. And then to the point about gender disparities, I think, I'm a great fan of this. I think having a senior executive team, having a board that has a real diversity on it, and a senior management culture that's the same, and then all the way down the organization, that removes quite a lot of the issue, because part of the assumption in that question is that the senior management cohort will be in the office kind of male dominated cohort, and a lot of these issues potentially are resolved by just having a much more diverse senior management cadre. And then the final thing I wanted to say is props to the person who commented, and don't even get me started on the menopause, which has to be one of the best comments in the chat I've seen in a panel debate. So I just wanted to give a special call out to that. T-shirt.
Thanks so much. Claire, can you come to John Halston now, who I think is in fact available? John. Hi, welcome. I think, John, you had some interesting research on call centers, which intrigued me. But we can't hear you. I think you still need to unmute.
Traditionally, call centers are the bane of one's life. You are confronted by people who basically say the computer says no. You often have to escalate it to their manager. I found over the last 18 years a far more constructive response from call centers, from people working at home. And I think employee satisfaction is increased when people feel more responsible for what they're doing. I mean, I think people who are working at home don't have the pressures of what they are in the call center, and they look for the solution and enjoy it. I'd like to know whether, from their viewpoint, that is something that the industry has discovered themselves.
Is that just because the literal physical presence of a manager, John, or is it also because of their colleagues, do you think? I
don't know. I've not worked in a call center. I'm told they're horrendous places from my children who have.
But it's a very interesting, I mean, you describe a very interesting sort of laboratory experiment, so to speak, which is that there may be, however mundane the setting, there may be the greater sense of fulfillment in performing that work in a group than in the notional comfort of one's own home.
No, the other way around. I think people get more involved in the problem when they can focus on it in their own home.
Okay, interesting. Can I come back to Katja, just to talk about sort of the way forward, because I think now we're entering a phase where variance allowing, we're going to be on a fairly clear slip road through Christmas and into the new year. What do you think? Where do you think we'll be in all this 6 months to a year from now?
Gosh, difficult question. So I think we are seeing quite a kind of, and we haven't really touched on that because we've had so many other things to discuss. I think the labour market is quite buoyant or vibrant at the moment. So I think we're seeing a lot of people, employees, thinking about what they want from work, and then thinking, do I get that in my current role? Do I want to change job within my current company, or do I want to move to somewhere else? And resourcing is a massive issue for us in recruitment, and making sure that we attract really good people. So understanding what makes people want to come and work for Capita, and as Claire was saying earlier, I think having a social purpose and that, standing for something we're finding is a kind of key lever that we have, and one of the reasons why people come to work for us. So I guess in 6 months, I think we will have seen quite a lot of change. I think people will have moved around, thought about what they want, possibly, you know, moved to town or city in some cases, just as all these changes bed in. And then I hope we have got to a more kind of stable place with regard to hybrid working or virtual first, as somebody put in the chat, where we've made it work for the company and for the employees. So we're using it appropriately, and perhaps not debating so much what's right or what's wrong, but we've just found a way of making it work. I mean, that's what I would hope to see, but it will be interesting. And then I think the final point, just to make and to build on the point around call centre, we have a lot of contact centres in the UK, and a big employer of people who work there. And what we have found, people always used to say you couldn't call centres could never been done remotely, it had to be kind of location specific. But actually we've now got loads and loads of people who work from home and will continue to work from home. And I think for lots of individuals, it suits them much better because they save time and money on commuting. But also it's enabled us to recruit from a much wider pool of people. So they can live and work anywhere in the UK, we don't care. And they can have caring needs, they can have disabilities, they can have issues that would have made it difficult for them to come to a physical workplace, but actually they're extremely capable of doing the job from home. So I guess the final point is around, hopefully it will make the workplace more inclusive and kind of spread the benefits of growth. I do think if we get this right, there's a massive levelling up benefit from working more flexibly too.
That's very interesting. Claire, can I come back to you as we draw towards the end of the session? Just a few thoughts. I mean, one is whether you agree that nationwide that to a certain extent we are, at the moment at least, and who knows for how long, in an employees market, in that, you know, it's a seller's market rather than the buyer's market. Is that true? And does that have implications for how employers have to respond?
Yes, so I think, you know, we're certainly seeing that, you know, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of demand right now. You know, it's a hot market for recruiting. There's a lot of people who are looking for to hire employees. So, you know, absolutely right. And I do think that has potential, you know, benefits, as Katja said, for what employers will be prepared to offer in terms of flexibility. So that could be a really, really positive thing. I just also wanted to come back on the point that was made about people, if they're working from home, being more human. And in some ways sort of shedding their kind of corporate shell. And we did some research in terms of our own call center operators and other people who were working from home. And what we found is we had, you know, 30% of our people saying that actually being at home and being in that home environment sort of made them feel more empathetic towards sort of member needs, more consideration of the member as a sort of human person. So, you know, beyond the, okay, you're trying to process a transaction, you know, is a person whose payment has gone wrong or is trying to get their mortgage sorted, and actually being in your own home trying to deal with them does inject that kind of extra element of humanity. So it was interesting. I mean, that came out from my research as well. It was sort of validated. You know, I think the whole underlying challenge really in a lot of ways is how you convey humanity through this digital thing that we're doing now. And it's true both in terms of how businesses are trying to engage with customers, but also how businesses are trying to engage, you know, with each other in the kind of world of work. So, you know, I think there's going to be a lot of focus on different ways to convey humanity and interpersonal connection through digital means. And, you know, hopefully that will come up with some really innovative stuff because it's needed.
So thank you so much. Such a good note to end on. Time is running out, alas. I just wanted to mention 3 points that I will take away from this, and I think are worth further journalistic exploration by Tortoise. I mean, the one is the as it were, the nuts and bolts of mental health care in companies, and the difference between awareness and practicality, and the difference between being aware that one of your colleagues is struggling and having the capacity to do something about it, but also as Andrew Goodwood and others mentioned, you know, the genuine questions of privacy. And I think we are a way away from working out how to do that. The second, was a point that was made by Linda and then other speakers, which is there is this risk, I think, that in all of this, there'll be a sort of creep back to a gender division in work practices. And that's obviously, undesirable on every conceivable level. But it does seem to me a clear and present danger. And so I agree wholeheartedly that it maximizes, the new working model maximizes the need to have proper representation and diversity in senior and perhaps also in other levels of management, so that there is an awareness of that, and you don't end up with just a small cadre of white middle-aged men back in the office as if it was 1991, which I doubt will happen, but one eternal vigilance is always a good idea. I've gone 1 minute over already. Huge thanks to Katja and Claire for being such absolutely brilliant speakers. Thanks to Capita for their partnership in this session. Thanks to all of you for attending. You've got time to go off and make a cuppa, but don't miss the next session, which I think is going to be a really good one, edited by my colleague Luke Bedamer on modern slavery, which I think is a huge issue and one we won't want to miss. Thank you very much. Go and get some refreshment and see you shortly.